Knoxville did not have a real art presence. The only visible art presence was a rather new art department at UT, and they tried valiantly. They were not housed very well. They were housed in many different buildings on campus, and they were mostly the face of particularly modern art in Knoxville.
My parents weren't art collectors. My parents had a broad appreciation of the arts, but they understood that that was important. So my mother, as a mid-20th century housewife, found her way to the Doolin Art Gallery to do volunteer work. And when you're a kid at home and your mother goes and does work like that, sometimes, and more often than not, you get brought along too.
Well, I think first of all you have to really go back to the days of the Doolin. And we had been supporter of the Doolin. We'd had exhibits there. Like John Chumley, a native Knoxvillian, we'd sponsored his exhibit. And at that time we knew that the building at the Doolin was not adequate and we needed to do something.
And we felt, and so did the city, that they needed to move off of Kingston Pike. It was difficult to get to, but coming downtown seemed to convince the business people that it would be a good thing. I can't tell you how many people, many of the people who contributed the most said, I don't care anything about art, I don't know anything about art, but I think it would be good for the city, perhaps.
And then we got in all the political policy about moving from the Doolin site where we were funded and going to the World's Fair site where it was a dream. The complication was the Folgers had given us the Doolin Museum or gallery to use the mansion, and the mansion was clearly not adequate to build a regional art museum. It was good for the time that it served, but it wasn't ready to grow.
So I think that as we thought through the process, also we thought we could raise a lot more money if we had a bigger venue. And of course the World's Fair site was the ideal place to locate it.
But we all knew that, and we understood in the broader sense also, going back to the late 70s and after the World's Fair was over, we understood that this land in the middle of the city would be dedicated to public use.
And there was some preliminary work done, and Bruce McCarty had, I think, a drawing of a museum.
We met with the faculty of the College of Architecture, and we were telling about what we were planning to do. And one of the faculty said, had you ever consider going for a nationally known architect, somebody with experience with the museum? And we didn't think that, well, that was a revelation to us. And anyhow, that's how Ed Bowens eventually was selected.
Alan Solomon took the reins, and he was very firm and strong as in all his endeavors. And he thought that we should have a competition, an architectural competition, national, to find the best architect for Knoxville. And the one really big architect who had done museums who bit was Edward Larrabee Barnes. And we were thrilled because he had a very good reputation. I think there were a lot of people who thought, who cares, you know, who he is. But Alan was strong.
A member of our board of trustees came to me and said, Dr. Solomon, we're East Tennessee people, we're Ford people, we're not Cadillac people, we really shouldn't have something like that. And I was shocked when this person told me that. And I said, you know, if you don't set your standards high, you'll never get there.
There was should we focus on this being a museum representative of what's going on in our area, or should it be an art museum that we can have the capacity and the ability to bring art in?
Our position as a museum has become really that sense of how we belong to Knoxville, how we belong to the region, and how we fit in as an important part of the life of this region.
I'm just surprised at all of the things that happen here really rapidly. It seems that once we got our sea legs, we really became serious about having a museum that stood for something.
We needed to make a decision. So through that decision, different people were brought on the board, more influential people, and we began trying to move to the World's Fair site.
But for the most part, we had a very strong support base from the community as a whole, from the business community, from the arts community, from other people about building a museum on the World's Fair site that would be a major attraction for this community.
Meredith and I were always scheming about how to make things better and work, and so we pretty much decided that the World's Fair site or downtown was the location for a new museum. And
We moved, we finally got the move, we got some funding, and we were going to move to the fair site. There were people that were very influential, very artistic, who would say it's never going to happen, you'll never pull this off. But Caesar believed it. By then the board had widened, Alan believed it, I believed it, Rebecca believed it. And so after lots of years of work, we got to the fair site.
I think you're right. I think I really had not been involved, not to any significance for time or money, until Barbara and Caesar came to see me one morning. The only time we could schedule it is December the 26th, the morning that I was taking all the family, as I do every year, to Vail, Colorado for a week of skiing. And they brought the picture, and I could see them now, and wouldn't let me leave town until I agreed to fund the shortfall.
I think it was a Christmas Eve or thereabouts that Caesar was successful in talking with Mr. Clayton. And
Well, as you can guess, Caesar Stair was not disclosing that he was going to hit on me for the $3 million required to finish the museum. But he indicated it was an important meeting, and so Barbara was calling and Caesar was calling. And
you know, Barbara Bernstein, I mean, a lot of people had been talking to I think she came up with the idea, why don't we ask Jim Clayton? And I had been talking to Jim and talking to Jim and talking to Jim. And
I liked it. At first, I couldn't relate to $3 million worth, but
because I know that whatever he does is going to be, whether this thing is going to be successful or not. And because he was the only person with the money and that could really push us over the top and convince me in my own mind that we were going to do this and not fall flat on our face.
we negotiated and we talked and discussed and ended up okay.
And so he wrote, and then he hands me this piece of paper, yellow, I never will forget it, yellow legal pad. So he writes down there, you know, basically a $3 million gift.
If I can get out of town, everybody's waiting, I got to get to the airport. If I can give you a check for $1 million now and $200,000 a year for 5 years and $100,000 a year for 10 years, that adds up to $3 million. And we shook hands and hugged, and I grabbed my suitcase.
That gift, more than any other, put us over the top. We still had a long way to go, a lot of money left to raise, but I knew when we had that gift that we would eventually get there.
Caesar was successful in talking with Mr. Clayton, and it just all became a reality quickly once we got there.
The opening was spectacular.
Well, we had a good time. We like to throw parties, you know.
I love the fact that there was so much marble, because marble is, you know, part of the East Tennessee region, you know, the marble industry. And I felt like, you know, it was so different from the Doolin. The Doolin is this very neoclassical house, and here we go into the KMA, and it's this modern building, and it just screams, this is an art museum. This is an art museum of the present, you know, and we're going to do things very professionally here.
I came into the picture the summer of 1990. I had just finished graduate school in art history, and while I was gone, the building had been built. So I get back and here I see this brand new museum building in my hometown. And a few weeks later, they offered me the job after I'd done some consulting with the new director at the time. And one of the things that was so hard for me to make the transition from was this vast collection I had experienced at the Cleveland Museum of Art as a 2-year fellow, and then I get here to the KMA. We didn't have much of any collection.
We were all euphoric, and it was a big celebration, and we were all euphoric. It was a big accomplishment.
I think it's a really healthy and satisfying thing to see. What I think the founders, that generation that raised the money for this fantastic building, that sort of dreamed that dream and made it come true, they've given us this great sort of canvas to fill. And none of this would have happened without that original vision and that ambition and that kind of crazy, wild, gosh, we can do this against all odds.
I really believe that the strength of the museum lies in its acquisitions. That's what makes people come to museums. So I think that we're on the right track.
I was glad to have a part in it, yeah. Very proud of it. It's like birthing a baby, but it's only 25 years old.
I feel it's a great privilege to be able to stand on the shoulders of those who envisioned this remarkable building and to create what has happened in the last 25 years.
A lot of things, when you kind of smooth it out over a long period of time, when you really think about it, they weren't that important. The main thing was we had a group of people that felt we ought to have a museum that ought to be located on the World's Fair site. And over the years, that support base is bigger than it was. And you have people giving money in substantial amounts that you never thought would give.
I think it's my relationship. Because we were involved way before even the concept of where we were going to put it. I think even in the 60s, we knew we would ultimately have an art museum. I think our and it continues, the growth in relationships. We've got a clan here, don't you think, Bernie? Of people who love art, and we have. I use the word family. It gets overused. You're my family in here. You're my family there. But we have a family here. We really do.
I don't think any of us, at least for me, I didn't realize the museum would end up where it is today. I think it's way ahead of my dreams.
But how lucky for me that it wasn't named the Clayton Museum of Art. If that had been the case, when we had those meetings, I would have probably, instead of passing the hat and all these other people contributing, I would have been in there writing the checks and making it all happen. But those are fun times, and we look back, and it's been very important to me and my family to be associated with the museum all these years, and then to see the renovation and all that's happened, and to think back, how did 25 years happen? How could it be 25 years? That was only yesterday, but that's life.